Welcome to the Glen Merzer Show, where we talk all things vegan. If you're not already vegan, no worries, we'll get you there. If you are, tune in for health advice, information on climate change, and all the damage done by our most destructive industry, animal agriculture. We'll also talk cooking, theater, film, and culture. My 2 reasons for starting this podcast: to entertain, to inform, and to make people vegan. Oh, that's 3. Shit. Hey folks, what you're about to see is a video I recorded of a PowerPoint I did called How to Win the Argument with Meat Eaters. And it was done for my friend Gustavo Tolosa, who has his own YouTube channel. He was good enough to share it with me. Gustavo is the co-author, along with Shada Soleimani, of this wonderful book, Live Your Healthiest Life. I hope you'll read that book, and I hope you'll enjoy this video. Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another very interesting and thought-provoking webinar, this time with my friend Glen Merzer. Maybe many of you know him because we've done webinars before, but he is the author of America Goes Vegan, which I have, and I've done it. We've covered it in our book club, and also Food is Climate, which we've also read in a book club. And anyway, Own Your Health. Glenn has also collaborated with Chef AJ and recently with the book that Shada and myself wrote, and Glenn helped us so much put it together because it wasn't an easy book to put together. So, and besides Glenn, you have written other books as well. So welcome. Tell us about
Good
what
to
else.
see you, Gustavo. I've got more than a dozen books that I either wrote or co-authored. But today we are going to make plant-based history. Do you know why?
No, tell me.
Well, because I've got a YouTube channel, The Glen Merzer Show, that I started about a year ago. And as you might remember from when you started a channel, it takes a while to build up the subscribers. And you finally build up to 100, and then you're at 120 and 130, and you think, when am I going to get to 200 and then 250? And it just takes a long time. Well, I'm at 980. So this video could get me over the 1,000 mark. And what I think happens when you go over 1,000, you get a phone call from the CEO of Google, and they give you a Tesla. I think that's what happens. So I'm hoping to get over 1,000 subscribers.
I think you will. Yeah. I did it. So we are both making history here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this could be the video that does it, that gets me over 1,000. So if you're listening, you could go to the Glen Merzer Show and subscribe. Get me over 1,000.
Yes, so that you can get the phone call.
Yes. And the Tesla.
And yes, exactly. Well, let's get started. I can't wait to hear it. I've never heard you give this presentation.
Yes, this is a presentation called How to Win the Argument with Meat Eaters.
Okay, well, I need to hear that. So it's all yours.
All right, here we go. How to win the argument with meat eaters. That's the subject, and I'm assuming that the audience for us skews vegan. But for those who may be listening and are not vegan, please take this as an argument for why you should join our team. We'd love to have you, and we need more members of the club. There are generally three reasons why people adopt the vegan diet: for their own health, for the environment, or for the animals. to end the cruel confinement and slaughter of animals. All three arguments are equally valid and persuasive to me, and probably to many of those listening. But what's the best way to convert meat eaters to veganism? Is it to try to convince them that meat eating is cruel to the animals, that we have no moral right to effectively enslave and kill other sentient beings? Or is it to try to raise the alarm about how animal agriculture burns the land and creates deserts, wastes tremendous amounts of water, pollutes our waters, fouls the environment with cesspools of manure, and is responsible for most of the deforestation in the world and most of the biodiversity loss, and is the leading cause of climate change? In short, the fact that animal agriculture is an environmental nightmare. Or is it to try to convince people that they'll live longer and thrive on a vegan diet? Should we simply appeal to people's immediate self-interest? They will likely become healthier and live longer if they give up animal foods. Well, you may sense that the person you're debating is most open to the environmental argument, and so you may decide to go with that. Or maybe your meat-eating friend thinks of herself as a big animal lover, then you may want to stress the moral argument about killing sentient beings. There's no one right answer, but I want to suggest what I believe is the strongest argument to be prepared to make with non-vegans. I don't think anybody has ever argued that confining, slaughtering, and eating animals is better for the animals. That's a hard case to make. Meat defenders generally grant that advantage to the vegans. And almost all meat eaters with any degree of environmental consciousness concede that the plant-based diet is better for the environment in all kinds of ways, since it's impossible to argue that cesspools of manure, the industry calls them lagoons, improve the environment, or that gigatons of methane belched into the atmosphere improve the climate, or that chopping back the Amazon to allow for cattle grazing does the planet any good, or that the trawling of the ocean floor by industrial fishing helps the oceans. Meat eaters often know that, but it just doesn't matter enough to them. That's why I think it's most important to lead with the health argument, or at least be prepared to make the health argument. Who wrote these words? Choosing to avoid meat and eat a plant-based diet has never seemed so virtuous and necessary. Between the intrinsic cruelty of industrial livestock production and livestock's climate footprint, estimated by the UN's FAO to be 14.5% of all greenhouse gases worldwide, significantly greater than that of plant agriculture, it has become increasingly difficult to defend the place of meat and animal source foods in our diets. Who wrote these words? They were written by Gary Taubes, perhaps the leading advocate of beef eating and the keto diet. Even Gary Taubes, you see, concedes the animal cruelty argument and the environmental argument. He just believes that though it's a shame that animal agriculture destroys the environment and is cruel to animals, eating them is healthy. So if we win the health argument, the other side has nothing left, as Gary Taubes has effectively conceded. Two kinds of scales symbolize the opportunity here. The first is the balance scale, because the argument you will hear most often from meat eaters is a balancing of goods versus harms. Almost all meat eaters concede, after all, the environmental and animal cruelty debate. So what these meat defenders do is balance the harm done to animals and to the environment with the supposed good of meat eating to your health. You've heard people say something like, yeah, it's a shame that the animals have to die and I wish they were treated better. And I know that the methane emitted by cows is bad for the climate, but after all, animal foods are healthy and people have to get their protein and their calcium. And those harms are a shame, but they're the price we just have to pay because people's health comes first. I don't want to be weak or anemic or protein deficient. So if you could convince these people that animal foods are in fact unhealthy, that everything they believe about meat eating and health is a myth, they have no case. When the truth hits them that meat and dairy are in fact making us sick and killing us, and that we would have far more food if we didn't feed our food grains to animals, that balance scale becomes pointless because all the weight is on one side of the scale. And then there's that other scale, the scale that you weigh yourself on. This scale is even more important to most Americans because, along with Mexico, which now eats a diet resembling ours, we are the fattest nation on earth. North America is the fattest continent on earth. 42% of Americans are obese. 74% of Americans are considered either overweight or obese. And you'll encounter a lot of meat eaters who actually believe that eating meat helps keep their weight down because they believe that carbs make you fat. So, with regard to both scales, if you win the health argument, you win the debate. Even if you can just convince people that they'll lose weight on a plant-based diet, they may not care about the animals or the planet or even other health concerns. They just want to get in shape. 74% of Americans have that concern as a top priority. So winning the health argument is crucial, and particularly understanding how your diet affects your weight. The knock on the vegan diet is that it makes you weak, presumably the same way it makes elephants and bulls and rhinos and gorillas weak. The documentary Game Changers about vegan bodybuilders helps some, but the myth persists. You've got to be able to counter the myths, and what makes myths sound impressive is when scientific studies are cited to defend them. When people try to make the case for eating meat and dairy, they often say that they read this study or that study that said that meat eating is healthy, or at least not too unhealthy, or they read an article that vegans have weak bones or smaller brains or their teeth fall out. The internet is full of disinformation. You can find articles to support the thesis that the world is flat. The truth is that the overwhelming evidence in scientific studies supports a plant-based diet. Study after study shows that the plant-based diet leads to healthier blood pressure and lower risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer than a diet high in animal foods. Study after study shows that the plant-based diet leads to a healthier weight than a diet high in animal foods. You can browse nutritionfacts.org to find countless videos about studies that support the vegan diet. But if you look hard enough, you can also find studies that cast shade on the vegan diet. Just Google, "Is a vegan diet healthy?" studies, and you'll find a world of articles and links to studies detailing the health advantages of a vegan diet. And you'll also find some articles and studies that claim that a vegan diet is risky. It took me just a minute to find a study that claimed, quote, vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems, which may lead to a poorer quality of life. An optimal diet should be balanced, consisting of lean meat, nuts, fresh fruits and vegetables, and olive oil. A wholesome diet is essential in maintaining a healthy gut flora, which in turn is pivotal in avoiding inflammatory disorders. Now, if you're a committed longtime vegan, you read attacks like this associating veganism with mental health problems, and you tend to roll your eyes and wonder where the heck they come up with this nonsense. What's the basis for this extraordinary accusation? If you're not already a vegan, or maybe you're considering becoming a vegan, it sounds alarming. Vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems. That doesn't sound good. Maybe the vegan diet is too extreme if it leads to mental health problems. So let's come back to this quote, casting shade on veganism, later, and see if it's true and just how worrisome it should be. Why is it that you could find a study to support almost any proposition in the world of nutrition? Because research scientists do so many bad studies. There's a lot of money in research, and studies are done that are designed to create confusion. Maybe there's an incentive for research scientists to create confusion because that enables them to get more grants to do more studies. There are no studies, after all, as far as I know, on the motivations of nutritional research scientists when they design studies, but I'd love to see that study. Anyway, here's the problem. Let's say you want to do a study on whether or not a vegan diet is healthy. You could contrast one group eating vegan with one group eating meat, right? Now, it's sometimes said that the ideal research study is a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study. That's how drug studies are often done. So if you do that, you'd have a highly regarded study. But what does it mean to be a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study? Double-blind means that neither the patients nor the researchers know which study group the patients are in. So if you're testing a new drug, neither you nor your doctor knows if you're getting the new drug or a placebo. How do you do that with food? Put on a blindfold every time you eat? You can't do that. So obviously you can't do a double-blind study of diet. Can you use a placebo? Half the people eat a thing that looks like meat, but it's really a sugar placebo? No, there are no food placebos. Can you do a randomized study? Well, a randomized study randomly assigns participants to either an experimental group or a control group. There's a popular Netflix film now called You Are What You Eat, a twin experiment in which they randomly assign people to eat either the meat diet or the vegan diet. And some people who wanted to be on the vegan diet wound up on the meat diet and the other way around. What did they gain through that randomization? They could say it was more scientific to be randomized, but they just wound up with participants who were more likely to cheat on their diet. And they even filmed a woman who was supposed to be on the vegan diet, but she didn't want to be, and she started eating chicken. So all these design metrics, randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blind, may be the best way to do drug studies, but they're completely irrelevant to nutritional studies. And so most nutritional studies are what we call self-reporting. That there you run into other problems. Are the self-reported vegans on a healthy, whole foods, low-fat vegan diet, or are they eating French fries and drinking Coke? Did the self-reported vegans become vegan at age 65 after being diagnosed with heart disease? Are some of the meat eaters eating more fruits and vegetables than the vegans? And then there are lifestyle factors like exercise, smoking, drinking, and drug use that also affect health. So instead of arguing over studies, let's use logic to analyze diet. If someone's going to claim that there's some benefit to eating animal foods, they have to identify where the benefit lies. If you're debating with a meat advocate, challenge them to identify the benefit. That's not too much to ask. So let's analyze diet. This is a list of the 5 macronutrients: carbohydrate, protein, fat, water, and fiber. But I'm going to complicate things because I've discovered the 6th macronutrient, which we'll return to at the end of the presentation. The 6th macronutrient not yet accepted by established science, but I'll make the case for it later. So for now, let's limit ourselves to the 5 macronutrients. Sometimes water and fiber are excluded from this list, but you need all 5 of these to live, so let's call all 5 macronutrients. These are the 5 indispensable components of diet. So if someone's going to claim a health advantage to animal foods, it's got to reside in at least one of these 5 macronutrients, right? Where else could it be? So let's take them one by one, starting with water. Severe dehydration can lead to seizures, kidney failure, coma, death. Chronic dehydration could lead to kidney stones, reduced kidney function, urinary tract infections, constipation, poor sleep, muscle damage, muscle spasms. Dehydration must be avoided at all costs. It's extremely important. This is not controversial. Nobody advocates dehydration. So, do you drink 8 glasses of water per day? Most of us don't. That's what's commonly recommended to prevent dehydration, but you'd have to do something like have a glass of water at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., noon, 2 p.m., 4 p.m., 6 p.m., 8 p.m., and 10 p.m. That's 8 glasses of water. How many people do that? I never did. I don't think I know anyone who drinks a glass of water every 2 hours like clockwork. And in the lay press, you'll often read that 75% of Americans are dehydrated, though there's actually no study that supports that number. Still, it's a safe bet that a significant percentage of Americans don't take in enough water. But you don't have to get your water from a glass. You can and should obtain much of your water from food. What's more full of water, plant foods or animal foods? Answer: plant foods. Apples are 86% water by weight, cantaloupes are 89%, strawberries 92%, celery 95%, cucumber and romaine lettuce are 96% water. Almost all fruits and vegetables are almost all water by weight. And it's the best, healthiest water on the planet. It's plant filtered water. And then when you cook whole grains, that's another ideal source of water. How do you make oatmeal? You boil oats, rice, buckwheat, millet, barley, quinoa. These are all cooked in water, and the grains absorb the water that's been purified to a large extent by boiling. Even legumes, beans, and lentils absorb the cooking water. But people don't generally boil bacon or chicken or burgers. So you have the filtered water that's naturally in plants. You also gain water from cooking grains and legumes. I might have a big bowl of oatmeal in the morning, serve it over some mixed greens, top it with berries and grapes, and I'm probably getting as much water from the cooked oats, from the greens, from the fruit as if I drank 3 or 4 glasses. But is there any water in meat? Yes, there's some water in meat. Meat has to be cooked, of course, and the higher the cooking temperature, the more water will be lost. Cooked meat, beef or chicken, for example, generally be about 50 to 60% water. Some of that often comes from what's called the flavor solutions of water, salt, and sodium phosphate injected into the meat by supermarkets to freshen up the taste of foul, decaying carcasses. Some of the water content is also what's called retained water. It's the water used to wash the feces off the carcasses in the slaughterhouse. So you've got your choice of eating plant foods that are rich with naturally filtered water, or eating animal foods and getting a little bit of slaughterhouse water and liquid flavoring from supermarkets. Clearly, advantage plants. There's probably been no avenue of nutritional science that's advanced more in the last 40 years than the study of fiber. We know that it healthfully slows down digestion, normalizes blood sugar levels, carries cholesterol out of the body, promotes healthy colonies of bacteria in the gut, lowers the risk of heart disease, diabetes, diverticular disease, colon cancer, and constipation, and has countless other beneficial effects, including fighting depression. And of course, fiber is only in plant foods. There's absolutely no fiber in any animal foods unless you get lucky and eat a fish that swallowed part of a fishing net. One reason you need fiber is for the metabolites they produce. Metabolites are substances produced during metabolism, the reactions in our cells that change food into energy. And it just so happens that dietary fiber is crucial to creating metabolites that improve our health and even metabolites that can improve our mood, as explained in the book Fiber Fueled by Dr. Will Bolshevitz. Plants protect and nourish us in part because of fiber. So, furophane from cruciferous vegetables, for example, increases healthy gut microbes like butyrates and repairs the intestinal lining to reverse leaky gut. But it just so happens that metabolites from meat consumption are dangerous. To sum it up, fiber is what your body craves to create health promoting metabolites. Animal foods have no fiber, and it just so happens they create toxic metabolites. The macronutrient score is now plants 2, animals 0. If there's any advantage to be found in animal foods, it's clearly got nothing to do with water or fiber. So it's time to move on to the third macronutrient. Carbohydrate is the most misunderstood macronutrient. We need to understand it better. Let's start with the question, are potatoes carbohydrates? No, potatoes are not carbs. Potatoes are a root vegetable, like beets and sweet potatoes. 90% of the calories in a sweet potato come from carbohydrate, 9% from protein, 1% from fat. 86% of the calories in a carrot come from carbohydrate, 9% from protein, 5% from fat. 83% of the calories in beets come from carbohydrate, 13% from protein, 4% from fat. And the russet potato, 88% come from carbohydrate, 11% from protein, 1% from fat. So you can see that the potato is in line with other root vegetables in having most of its calories from carbohydrate while still offering a significant amount of protein and a smidgen of fat. If you try to reduce a potato to a carb, you're ignoring its significant protein content, ignoring its slight amount of fat, ignoring its substantial content of water, which is about 75% of the potato by weight, and ignoring its fiber. It contains all 5 macronutrients, after all, as all human food does. And don't ignore the vitamins and minerals it contains: B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, iron, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium. So it's not a carb, it's a whole food. We have to stop calling potatoes carbs. This is a destructive myth. The only foods that should be identified with single macronutrients are the ones I've listed in this slide. All oils and butter are 100% fat, so it's accurate to refer to them as fat. Sugar in all its forms, white sugar, brown sugar, agave nectar, coconut sugar, it's all sugar. It's all carbohydrate. Egg whites are pretty close to being a pure protein. But potatoes are not a carb. Here's why the potato is a great weight loss food. Even though um, potatoes are very filling, there's actually less than 1 calorie per gram of potato. Now, how can that be? People call potatoes carbs, right? And we know that there are 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. So how could there be less than 1 calorie per gram of potato if it's a carbohydrate? Shouldn't potatoes be 4 calories per gram? Well, the answer is that potatoes are not a carbohydrate. They're a root vegetable, and by weight, they're mostly fiber and water. So if you're filling yourself up on a vegetable that's got a lot of 0 calorie content, a lot of fiber and water, leaving the potato with 1 calorie per gram. How about bread? Is bread a carb? No. Ezekiel's sprouted grain bread made with sprouted wheat, filtered water, sprouted barley, sprouted millet, sprouted lentils, sprouted soybeans, yeast, gluten, and sesame seeds is 80 calories per slice and is 25% protein with 1 gram of fat. It's about 70% carbohydrate, so it's not a carb. It's a processed food, but as breads go, it's a pretty healthy one with a range of nutrients. Other breads may not be that healthy, but no bread is a pure carb. How about tortillas? Are they carbs? I have a package of corn tortillas. It's got 60 calories, about 4 of which come from protein and 3 from fat. And this is clearly protein and fat that derives from the corn, so the tortilla is not a carb. Is pasta a carb? I've got some red lentil penne made from red lentil flour and brown rice flour in a 3.5 ounce serving. It's got 22 grams of protein and 2 grams of fat. It's extremely high in protein. It's not a carb. Even regular old semolina wheat pasta in a 2 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein. And I don't know about you, but when I eat spaghetti, I eat a lot more than 2 ounces. Only sugar in its many forms is a carb. Donuts are not carbs. Donuts have oil and they may have dairy or eggs. Donuts are going to be very high in fat as well as sugar. Donuts are unhealthy for more reasons than I can count, but they shouldn't be called carb and thereby slander carbohydrate, the natural fuel for the human body and the sacred joining of carbon and water that makes life possible. If you're going to claim that there's anything wrong with carbohydrate, you have to claim that there's something wrong with all vegetables and all fruits. We know that these are the healthiest foods on the planet, rich in fiber and antioxidants and vitamins and minerals. People never say that they're on a diet, so they have to avoid broccoli, but they say that they're avoiding carbs because they're trying to lose weight. But most of the calories in broccoli come from carbohydrate, although there's a good amount of protein and a bit of fat. So why do people associate carbohydrate with being fattening? For one thing, because sugar, which is truly carbohydrate, it's 100% carbohydrate. Sugar is terribly fattening. There are 1,775 calories in a pound of sugar, which is truly a carb. There are 350 to 400 calories in a pound of potatoes, which is a root vegetable. So yes, carbs are fattening if you're eating a pure carb, sugar or maple syrup. But don't mislabel potatoes as carbs and then claim they're fattening. Carbohydrate within whole foods is a good thing. It's human fuel. You can't live without it. Plants are what provide you with carbohydrates. Just as there's no fiber in meat, there's no carbohydrate in meat. So once again, we have a no-brainer macronutrient category. When it comes to carbohydrate, which is indispensable to life, plants provide it and flesh foods simply do not. So clearly plants are superior to animal foods when it comes to macronutrient number 3, carbohydrate. That brings us to fat. The advocates of the paleo diet and the keto diet want to try to convince you that fat doesn't make you fat. The argument is so preposterous that it's kind of hard to take seriously. Look, we know what contributes to obesity. Highly caloric foods, including some vegan ones. Alcohol, all forms of isolated sugars and oils, which are 100% fat, and flesh foods, which are usually in the range of 50% fat, and dairy foods, which are extremely high in fat. When you eat a whole foods vegan diet, and if you eliminate or absolutely minimize sugar, oil, and alcohol, it's all but impossible to get fat. Now, you need some fat in your diet. It's one of the macronutrients, after all. So, what's the problem with eating too much fat? To start off with, it's got 9 calories per gram instead of 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. So over time, if you're eating a diet that's 35 or 40% of your calories from fat, of course you'll gain weight compared to a diet that's 10% calories as fat. Just in my lifetime, the average middle-aged woman or man in the United States is about 25 to 30 pounds heavier than they were when I was a boy. Since 1960, the prevalence of adult obesity in the United States has more than tripled, from 13% in 1960 to 42% today. And I like to note that since Obamacare went into effect in 2013, giving upwards of 20 million more Americans access to medical care, obesity in America has increased from 36% to 42%. So clearly, going to the doctor isn't a very effective way of combating obesity. Nobody should be fat shamed. We're not trying to hurt anyone's feelings here. We're trying to stay on point in a debate about health. But we can't pretend when we discuss health and nutrition that obesity is anything other than a disease state. Being obese is statistically associated with greater all-cause mortality, heart disease, hypertension, cancer, type 2 diabetes, stroke, high cholesterol, fatty liver disease, gout, arthritis, and more. And when you have what's called metabolic syndrome, this group of conditions that are linked, obesity, heart disease, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, each condition contributes to the other. Is it the obesity that causes the hypertension that causes the heart disease? Why are all these diseases linked? Because it's the cheeseburger and the pork that causes the obesity and causes the heart disease and the high cholesterol and the type 2 diabetes and the high blood pressure. These diseases are all linked because they have the same cause, the fatty, animal-based Western diet. Now, it's not only animal foods that make the Western diet fatty. Oil is also a factor. But all those fatty foods can result in high cholesterol teaming up with saturated fat to create atherosclerotic plaques that attack the arteries and ultimately the heart. Question: of all the mammals, how many develop atherosclerosis? Let me give you now the complete list of all the mammals that struggle with atherosclerosis. That's the list. Just like we're the only species to take selfies, it just so happens that we're the only species to get atherosclerosis. We should have been able to deduce that we're herbivores since the year 1913, when a Russian fellow named Nikolai Nikolaevich Anichkov, working at a lab in St. Petersburg, fed cholesterol from egg yolks to some poor, unsuspecting rabbits and thereby brought on atherosclerotic plaque and lesions. And, as was thereafter established, it just so happens that when you feed cholesterol to omnivores and carnivores, such as dogs and cats, atherosclerosis never develops. Atherosclerosis, therefore, is a disease that develops only in herbivores, and it develops in humans. It brings on heart disease. Therefore, humans are herbivores. We're the only animal to develop atherosclerosis because all the other herbivores don't foolishly eat meat. You'll never find a rabbit eating a hamburger. And all the omnivores and carnivores are biologically protected against developing the disease. Atherosclerosis only affects meat-eating herbivores, and we're the only species stupid enough to qualify. Getting back to fat. Americans are way too fat, and animal foods are, of course, extremely fatty, often with 50% or more of their calories coming from fat. And we know that the saturated fat and trans fats in meat and dairy are particularly dangerous. You would think that we've arrived at a no-brainer, as the obvious lesson becomes eating animals damages our bodies because, among other factors, They're simply too fatty. But Americans can't give up on eating animals, certainly not just because the science tells them to do so. So along comes the keto diet to try to convince you that eating the bulk of your calories from fat is a good thing. You may ask, how could it possibly be good for Americans to eat more fat if they're already eating tons of fat and they're extremely fat and sick? That should be a rhetorical question. And yet the keto geniuses have come up with an answer, and I'm not making this up. They claim that eating a lot of fat is good for you because as long as you can manage to eat fat and almost nothing but fat all day long, it leads to the state of ketosis, which they admit gives you bad breath and constipation and dehydration and fatigue and brain fog and increases your risk of developing kidney stones and gout and osteoporosis. And still, amazingly enough, it's highly desirable to achieve that wonderful state of ketosis in which fat rather than carbohydrate becomes your fuel because there are some people who claim they've lost weight that way. That's it. That's the reason for this obscenely unnatural diet in which you have to be scared of apples. Now, unfortunately, a good deal of the weight these keto dieters lose may have been water weight, since a high fat, high protein diet is going to stress your kidneys as they struggle to expel all that unwelcome protein and acid load. In order to attain the glorious state of ketosis, you need to consume something like 80% of your calories as fat. See this picture of a fatty cut of meat? To make this meal fatty enough for the keto diet, at very least, you'd have to get rid of the broccoli and the potatoes. You might have to add some cheese. People actually strive to attain this glorious unnatural state of ketosis in spite of the bad breath and constipation and dehydration and brain fog and kidney stones and passing out, because they believe it'll make them nice and trim. Really. Now, I'm sure that some people have lost weight on a keto diet. But what is the logic of saying that you should risk all kinds of known health risks in order to allegedly lose weight when you can clearly lose weight on a healthy whole foods diet of plants and only plants? If you want to add more fat to your diet, if you're trying to gain weight, for example, or you feel better when you eat a little more fat, there are healthy plant options, nuts and seeds and avocados and olives, for example. There's no problem obtaining fat on a plant-based diet. The healthiest fats you could find are in flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, avocados, and walnuts, plant foods that are all high in omega-3 fatty acids. The proportion of fat is excessive and dangerous in animal foods, while most plant foods are low fat. And the plant foods that are rich in fat, like those I just named, have much healthier fat profiles than animal foods. Given that the fat in meat, eggs, and dairy is excessive and has the slight drawback that it can make you fat and sick and diabetic and can kill you, whereas plant, most plants are healthfully low in fat, we can conclude that fat is a slam dunk. You're far better off getting your fat in the right amount from plants. The score is now plants 4, animals 0. So where can the advantage possibly be in animal foods? There's only one macronutrient left. You know what the waiters ask? What's your choice of protein? Chicken, pork, beef, or fish? Well, this begs the question, is meat a protein? No, meat is not a protein. That's PR propaganda. If you're arguing with a meat eater, don't let them call meat protein. They've been conned. Don't let them con you. Meat is roughly half protein and half fat, so we could just as well call it a fat. You don't get to pick your favorite macronutrient and label a food accordingly. Ben & Jerry's chocolate chip cookie dough vanilla ice cream has 5 grams of protein in a serving. Maybe we should label that a protein too? Meat is not protein. Meat is muscle tissue from a dead animal, full of fat and cholesterol and toxins and endotoxins, as well as protein. In what the New York Times called the most comprehensive large study ever undertaken of the relationship between diet and the risk of developing disease, popularly known as the China study, Dr. T. Colin Campbell demonstrated that animal protein is carcinogenic. It's high in the amino acid methionine, which is implicated in the growth of cancers. Dr. Campbell's work proved that it just so happens that while animal protein brought on cancer, plant protein did not. Therefore, there should really be no dispute that plant protein is superior to animal protein. It's also superior because it's not excessive. Excessive protein does the human body no good because the body cannot store protein. You simply excrete it, and an overload of protein causes an acid load that stresses the kidneys. To make the case that you need animal protein to live or to thrive, you have to argue that you can't build muscle well on a vegan diet and that vegans must be falling down all over the place. But that's just not true. This is an image of the vegan bodybuilder Robert Cheek. The final score of the 5 known and established macronutrients is 5-0 in favor of plants. There's no macronutrient for which you could find an advantage in eating animal flesh or dairy. Now, you could imagine the embattled defender of the paleo or keto diet conceding, okay, I'll admit the whole food vegan diet is superior for the 5 macronutrients, but what about the micronutrients? Vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. Beef is full of vitamins and minerals. Well, where does a cow get its vitamins and minerals? From eating plants. There isn't a single vitamin or mineral that we need to cycle through an animal in order to obtain it. We could obtain it the way the animal does, from eating plants. And antioxidants are hugely important. They prevent oxidative stress to brain cells, to heart cells, to your eyes, to your organs. They reduce inflammation. They can prevent cancer. And they're essentially only in plant foods. You don't eat sausage to gain antioxidants. You eat berries and grapes and celery and beets, all kinds of fruits and vegetables. Toxins accumulate in the food chain and get stored in the liver and in the fatty tissues of animals. The grain that we feed to animals is almost never grown organically. It's heavily sprayed. The bigger fish that eat the smaller fish will be more likely to have higher levels of toxins. Plants filter out toxins. Organically grown plants are your best bet to eat clean food without toxins. How about the endotoxins? All food animals, whether they're from concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, or are grass-fed, organically raised, free-range, regeneratively raised, and in America it's about 99% CAFOs. But all of them are killed in the same slaughterhouses. So when you hear a defensive meat eater say, I only eat organically grown, grass-fed meat, well, it's killed in the same slaughterhouse as the conventionally raised cows. And when you cut open a dead animal, spoiler alert, the guts pour out. And even the happy, organic, grass-fed, free-range, regenerative guts, they also pour out. So every surface in a slaughterhouse is contaminated with E. coli, Salmonella, Campylobacter, and all kinds of harmful bacteria. In the meat cases in your local grocery store, the cuts of meat are exposed to ultraviolet light to kill the bacteria and the parasites. You don't have to do that with blueberries, naturally, because blueberries aren't filthy with harmful organisms, but you have to do it with sirloin steak. So hopefully it works and kills the bacteria, and certainly cooking will kill the bacteria. But these toxins then turn into endotoxins. Endotoxins are the main component of the outer membranes of the cell wall of the bacteria. Endotoxins are heat stable. You can't cook them out. When people eat meat, they may kill all the bacteria with cooking, but they're giving themselves a dose of endotoxins 3 times a day. Why would you want to do that? As this study explained, the endotoxins circulate in the blood at low concentrations in all healthy individuals. This study measured the endotoxin concentration in the bloodstream of participants after meals that were fatty and less fatty. It found that it just so happens that diets with large amounts of saturated fat, animal products, and refined carbohydrate may induce endotoxemia, too much endotoxins in the blood, more markedly than diets containing fiber-rich plant foods. I mentioned earlier that there's arguably a 6th macronutrient. The macronutrients are what you need to absorb in order to live, and you can't live without optimism. So optimism was discovered to be the 6th macronutrient according to me. And so you have to ask yourself, do you feel more optimism when you look at fruit trees or look at a confined animal feeding operation? What leads to more hope? The smell of fresh bread or the smell of a pig waste lagoon? What makes you feel more joy in being alive? A farmer's market full of fruits and vegetables, or a view of dead chickens on a motorcycle. Forests or barren land burnt by cow grazing. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find an interview with Dr. Silas Rao, whom I call the avatar of optimism. I hope you'll take a few moments to watch that. Because what we're trying to do here, the seemingly impossible goal of transforming the world to be a vegan, nonviolent place, is an optimistic undertaking. And so it's a healthy undertaking. The healthiest activity you can engage in is in trying to create a more vegan world. It may seem hopeless sometimes to convince others to go vegan, but it takes hope to try. So it's a healthy thing for you to do. Now, remember this alarming quote: vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems, which may lead to a poorer quality of life. An optimal diet should be balanced, consisting of lean meat, nuts, fresh fruits and vegetables, and olive oil. A wholesome diet is essential in maintaining a healthy gut flora, which in turn is pivotal in avoiding inflammatory disorders. Now, this was in a published study. Now that we've analyzed nutrition a little bit, let's analyze this quote. First, there is no evidence that vegans have a greater prevalence of mental health problems. I read a meta study on the subject and found that 44% of the outcomes indicated that vegetarian and vegan diets were associated with higher rates of depression, while 28% of the outcomes revealed beneficial effects of the diet on depression, and 28% found no association between vegetarian and vegan diets and depression. So you have completely meaningless results that prove nothing. And there's no logic to believing that a berry or a zucchini cause depression while a lamb chop will cheer you up. So the first sentence, presented as if it's true, is in fact utter nonsense. The second sentence, an optimal diet should be balanced. Well, that's meaningless also. Balanced in what way? Between healthy and unhealthy foods? Between processed and unprocessed foods? Between clean foods and filthy foods rife with bacteria? Why are we striving for balance instead of health? Consisting of lean meat. Lean meat does not exist. It's like clean coal. It's a marketing ploy. It's not a thing that really exists. Meat has fat inextricably connected to its protein. And if there really was such a thing as a low-fat piece of meat, it would just be wildly high in carcinogenic animal protein, which would make it even more dangerous. Consisting of lean meat, nuts. Okay, nuts may be healthy, but they're also fatty. So if you have meat, which is fatty, not lean, and nuts, that's a lot of fat. Fresh fruits and vegetables, that's good, that's good. And then the next thing it mentions is olive oil. I didn't know that olive oil was one of the 5 basic food groups. Olive oil is 100% fat. So if you're eating a diet with a lot of meat and nuts and olive oil, your destiny is obesity and type 2 diabetes. But this is what these researchers consider a balanced diet. It's balanced between fat, and fruits and vegetables. A wholesome diet is essential in maintaining a healthy gut flora. Yes, but we know that meat and eggs are rich in choline and carnitine, which creates microorganisms in the gut that create TMAO, leading to vascular oxidative stress and heart disease. So meat is terrible for the gut flora, creating toxic metabolites. But here it's presented without evidence as part of a healthy, balanced diet that's good for your gut flora. So what you want to do is produce short-chain fatty acids in your gut, and you produce them when the bacteria in your gut ferment fiber, not meat. Meat causes gut dysbiosis. And so this whole attack on vegans is emblematic of the empty attack on vegans, brimming with ignorance. But I don't let it depress me because I'm a happy vegan. You may have noticed that I use the phrase "that just so happens" several times in this presentation. Animal agriculture just so happens to have a horrific impact on the land as the leading cause of deforestation and biodiversity loss, pollutes our waterways, and is a leading cause of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. It just so happens that dietary fiber is crucial to creating metabolites that improve our health and even metabolites that can improve our mood. It just so happens that metabolites from meat consumption are dangerous. The study found that it just so happens that diets with a larger amount of saturated fat, animal products, and refined carbohydrate may induce endotoxemia more markedly than diets containing plant-rich foods. Well, of course, it doesn't just so happen. It happens because we are primates, cousins to the great apes, who eat a plant-based diet, practically a vegan diet. And that's how we evolved to eat. We are herbivores, and every time we stray from that, it just so happens that we damage our health and our world. That is what you need to know and convey to others to help promote a vegan world. These are my latest books, starting there with Live Your Healthiest Life by Gustavo Tolosa and Shada Soleimani, and I'm the co-author. Own Your Health, Food is Climate, America Goes Vegan. You could contact me through glenmerzer.com. This is I shouldn't really say my next book. It's Chef AJ's next book, but I helped her with it. It's called Sweet Indulgence. It's available for pre-order on Amazon today and Barnes and Noble and bookstores in general. And this is my YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the Glen Merzer Show. Help me get over 1,000 subscribers. Last I checked, I was at 980. So this video could help me get over the top. Thank you very much. I will stop the share now and go back to Gustavo.
Well, thank you. That was wonderful, Glenn. Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
So did I
And
convince you to go vegan, Gustavo?
I think I am pretty convinced.
Okay.
So, yeah, more than vegan, you convinced me to go plant-based, actually.
Okay.
So no, that is good. I mean, you know how people, and I think you mentioned it, can eat a very unhealthy vegan diet.
Yeah.
So I think we do need to stress that we're really promoting an unprocessed way of eating that is based on plants.
Whole plant food diet. Well,
Well, this
I'll tell you, Gustavo, your book with Shada, Live Your Healthiest Life. I meant to have a copy right here, but I don't. But that book is getting just such a warm reception from everyone who reads it.
it is, it is. So I hope people will take a look. It's right here, and
There it is.
it's
Yeah.
it's also available on Amazon and on Shada's website, which is Healthy Cooking with Shada, or my website, Plantemus, Plantemus.com. And yeah, and people get a really good deal because they get a bonus PDF, beautifully designed, and it has some of Shada's best rice recipes and some of my best desserts in it. So you can claim your bonus PDF after you purchase the books.
People
Thank you.
have to send in an email with proof of purchase to where?
That's right. That's right. They just need to send us a little short email with the proof of purchase. The email is LYHL. That stands for Live Your Healthiest Life. So LYHL bonus at yahoo.com. And then it will automatically get this wonderful PDF. So, okay, well, thank you again.
Thank
And
you, Gustavo, for the
just help,
opportunity.
yeah, anybody watching this video on our YouTube channels, please share it, give it a thumbs up, and that way we can reach more people and really show them how they can have a healthier existence. Okay? They don't have to be sick all the time.
Yeah. We just have to convince a few billion more people to go vegan.
Just a few billion, and really, it's not that much.
Yeah.
No, we'll
A
do
billion
it.
here, a billion there.
We'll do it together. We can do this.
Yeah.
Well, I hope to see you in another, webinar together soon.
Okay.
And thank you everybody for watching.
See you soon, Gustavo.
Okay. Oh,
This has been the Glen Merzer Show, where everyone listening turns vegan, regains their health, and annoys their friends and relatives. Find us on YouTube at The Glen Merzer Show and across all your major podcast platforms. Don't forget to subscribe.